What's up and welcome back to another synth video. It's sure been a while, but I'm happy to be back with what is probably, I'm gonna say it, my favorite synth I've ever done a review and video on. So, the third wave by Groove Synthesis, we're living in a golden age where brand new companies like these guys can come out with amazing flagship synths like the third wave. So what is the third wave? Well, to start off, I have to go back into a little bit of history. So the third wave is essentially based off of the PPG Wave 2.2, which, if we go all the way back to the 1980s, 1981 to be specific, this is the dawn of wavetable synthesis. So German company PPG created the very first wavetable synthesizer, the original PPG Wave 2, in 1981 and refined it from then on after. The PPG Wave was known for a very specific sonic character where it sounds both futuristic and retro at the same time. It's got this brittleness because of the digital oscillators and what sounds like aliasing going on, but it's going into beautiful, rich analog filters, and it's a very, very, very recognizable sound. So fast forward, and what Groove Synthesis are trying to do here is essentially do a modern recreation of the PPG Wave, but with a ton more bells and whistles. So I'll leave it to other videos to decide how truly close the third wave is to the original PPGs and more of the history of the PPG Wave if you're interested, but right off the bat we've got a bunch of amazing sounding PPG factory presets which sound just out of this world vibey. Like I said though, on top of being just a recreation of a vintage synth, the third wave is an absolute modern powerhouse. Here are a couple patches that utilize the more modern features of the third wave that I've made, and hopefully you can hear how much variety there is in this sound. All right, now for me at least, this synth has an absolute amazing character. It's both extremely hi-fi, but also warm and fuzzy, and has this wonderful analog character, which I really attribute to the extremely high quality circuitry, including the SSM analog filters. So let's spend a little bit of time, in fact, probably a lot of time because of how complicated this synth is, going over the front panel and all the features. Alright, so here we are on the front panel of the Third Wave. I've got it set up to one of my favorite patches to start with. Listen to how good that vintage PPG sound is. But let's start by initializing a patch. So one of the coolest things about the Third Wave is that for the workflow, you really have two choices. You can either go knob per function on pretty much everything important on the synth, or you have this wonderful screen here with these 4 encoders for a visual representation and quick control all in the center of the synth. Pretty much everything here works this way, where when you touch a knob, you basically go to the screen, and it's a really fast way to be able to get to wherever you need to go without, having to dive through any menus at all. So major bonus points there for how easy it is to get around this synth. And the screen is really only there if you want to go deeper or if you like that workflow, because again, with how big this synth is, almost everything is knob per function. So the initialized preset sounds a bit weird, to be honest. Let's go ahead and turn off these other oscillators and just hear one. We'll turn off the wave envelope. I do wish that there was a way to initialize it just to a basic, single waveform with no modulation whatsoever. Hopefully that'll come in firmware. But let's start off by recording a quick sequence so I can show you guys all the different types of wavetables and different starting points with our sound we can go from. So to do that, we'll go into sequencer. Let's check it out here. We'll change our BPM here. Let's turn off some swing. Don't want that. So we'll go down to 100 BPM. It's a really easy sequencer to use. Quantize that to 1/8 notes, and let's make it 2 measures long. You can see how everything is really logically laid out. I'm not having to do any menu diving. The screen is just there to help, as I was saying before. So let's go ahead and count ourselves in here. Turn down the release a bit. So really basic sequence. But yeah, let's check out some of the different waveforms. So over here, we have our oscillator section, and we have 3 identical oscillators, but we're gonna start with one. So going through our vintage PPG wavetables, so much character. That already sounds amazing to me. I really love the vintage PPG wavetables. I find I use them the most, although all of them are great. So check out some modern ones. So for every single wavetable, we have both the option to look at it in text form or actually as a wavetable, which is quite cool. So let's go back to our vintage PPG shapes for a second here. One of my favorite features about the oscillator section is the waveflow section. So if we click the waveflow button, then we actually are able to change whether or not we have wavetable smoothing. So let me go and show you guys what that sounds like with and without. So if we go to, let's see, PPG wavetable 20, we turn back on our wave envelope. If we have wavetable smoothing on, we can hear that it smoothly passes through all of the different parts of the wavetable. But if we turn that off, we get the characteristic stepping and aliasing. I think it's called aliasing, but definitely stepping through the different parts of the wavetable that was characteristic of the PPG. Similarly, if we want to use waveform smoothing, which I almost always leave off, we basically get to alias or smooth or have smooth the top of our waveform. So listen, as we turn on waveform smoothing, we lose a bit of that top end because it mathematically smooths everything out to a higher resolution. Can you hear that difference? Now, it's a great option to have, and I almost always leave waveform smoothing off and wavetable smoothing on. To me, that's the combo that I find sounds best because you get that vintage PPG character, but without the limitation of it stepping through the wavetables, wave offsets, so you can get some smooth modulation there. Finally, for extra authenticity, we can use the upper wavetable, which is a feature only for the PPG wavetables, but it actually is really awesome, and it's worth pointing out because basically it gives us, if I go back to our oscillator here, it gives us an extra 4 wave shapes at the end. So if we check that out here, my bad, we go at the end of the wavetable, it would normally end there, but instead we get a classic saw triangle pulse square. And you might be thinking to yourself, why would I use this if I have a really great virtual analog section? Well, honestly, the lo-fi saw square pulse triangle on the PPG wavetables is really vibey, and it's almost, in my opinion, I almost prefer it to the really pristine, excellent virtual analog, unless you're really trying to get something that is, analog modeling, because they just have a lot of character. Awesome. So as you can see, there's a ton of different options for your starting point for your sound. We have noise as well, all sorts of good stuff. And we're not even going to get into importing your own wavetables. But let's start off by designing something that uses a couple different oscillators. So I'm going to go and grab a PPG wavetable for number 1. And for number 2, let's detune them a little bit. And then for number 3, let's go ahead and do something a fifth above. Really vibey. So next up, let's jump to the filter section. So essentially what we have here is the same filter that's in the Prophet 5 and Prophet 10. It's a beautiful sounding SSM filter, 24 pole low pass, and we have underneath an additional digital state variable filter. Now this dual filter architecture is super powerful, and the digital filter sounds surprisingly fantastic. It's a SEM filter. If any of you guys have seen my video on the Oberheim OBX8 or OB6, a digital recreation. It's not quite as obviously, perfect as the real analog SEM, but it sounds great. But the low pass filter is 100% analog, and man, is it vibey. It's got such a character. It also has saturation, which we're going to use now. Now, I really love the gain staging on this synth. You do have to be a little bit careful because it's easy to distort the oscillators if you go past 100 total sum, if you see here, so I try to be around like 100, 120, but then I'll turn it up additionally with saturation, which listen what this does to the sound. If you hear that, basically, you kind of gotta be interested in getting the perfect balance because it does take a little while to tweak it to be perfect in my opinion, but this adds so much flexibility. We can either crank our oscillator volume as is and then have no saturation, or we can turn down our oscillators and turn up saturation, which will add a really pleasing smoothing kind of filling out of the sound. But just be careful if you have your oscillators all full blast like I did there, we got a little bit of distortion. So anyway, so we've got our saturation. Let's start playing with our filter here. Let's put in some envelope. Beautiful sounding. Now, one of my favorite features about this filter is we have a resonance compensation. So as we turn resonance up normally on this type of low pass filter, we lose bass, but by default, we have a compensation on where we don't. Now, I'm going to go against the grain and say I prefer it without resonance compensation, because that factors into what I was talking about before with really tweaking your sounds and how this synth kind of, it rewards you for being very detail oriented, where if we actually have it so that as we turn the volume down and lose bass, we're able to add more of that nice saturation and drive the filter more to get a bit of a richer sound. And I think that the natural way that the low pass filter loses bass as we turn up resonance makes for just a really, pretty and musical sound. So this is without the compensation. Beautiful. Let's play with our state variable here. So if we want a second low pass, you heard a little bit of clipping there. That's because I've driven it so much beforehand. So again, be very careful with your gain staging. This synth will go as distorted as you want or as clean as you want. High pass. Probably the way I use the state variable digital filter the most is just for a little bit of high pass, but we've got a notch as well, which is lovely, and a band pass. I love how the notch sounds here. So this is a good place to show you guys how the modulation works on this synth. So let's go ahead and add in, as simple as this, we'll add in we have two ways of doing modulation, but we'll take one of the preset LFOs. We've got 4 LFOs here, which is incredible. We'll take the shape, let's make it a sine here, and destination, let's go to state variable filter cutoff. And then let's crank up the amount and we should hear it. And of course we can use knobs here. I sometimes like using the screen, but you can do that entire thing without really using the screen too. It goes all the way up into audio rates. Beautiful. It sounds like a phaser, right? The other way we can do modulation on this synth, which is honestly incredible, is it's just like on the Pro 3 or the Pro 2, if you ever use those synths, which was my favorite thing about them. I no longer have my Pro 2, but by holding a source, you grab anything you want. Let's say, let's take oscillator 1, and then let's take a destination. Let's take the cutoff. Let's have some audio rate modulation, and then our amount. Just like that, we can assign literally anything. Like we could take, let's take, instead of the cutoff, let's take the saturation. Instead of the saturation, let's take the state variable resonance. I'm picking things that are kind of hard to hear, but you get the point. So we're not even done with modulation. We not only have the LFOs, but we have 4 envelopes, which we can assign to anything. And we also have, which is unique to the third wave, the wave envelope. So let's go ahead and show you guys the wave envelope. So what you do with this is it's a 6-stage envelope, which we can control either over here or with the screen. And we can basically use it to, over time, go through the entire wavetable. So let's make it pretty obvious to start with. I'll just do this. Something kind of random. Perfect, something like that. And then as I press a note, you can hear the wavetable changing in the background. Now, this is fantastic for pads. Having a 6-stage envelope, one of my favorite things to do is just grab a sound. Let's actually turn this sound into a pad right now, just so I can put my money where my mouth is. So we'll take our envelope, make the attack really long. We also have 2 kinds of envelopes, which is sweet. We can go to the original PPG style envelope, which is a lot slower with slower attack and longer release. Great for pads. Listen to how long that is. Let's turn down our... Listen to that morphing sound. Absolutely beautiful. The wave envelope is a really, really cool and unique feature of the third wave here. So this is a great time to show you guys the next feature I'm going to go through, which is the multi-timbrality nature of this synth. So we're going to have to, go through this quickly, but you can use your imagination how many different options they have. So the third wave is 4-part multi-timbral. So if I add in, as simple as that, we've now got a second part going. So underneath our pad, we have our initialized patch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into mode and then copy the first part, part 1, to the second part. Copy. Now I'm going to edit both at the same time. And now we're going to create a binaural patch because we have independent pan and volume for each one. If I want to, let's turn one to the right, one to the left. You can change the volume of them. Let's go into one of them first here. Detune it a little bit. Let's go back to editing. Let's go back to editing both at the same time. I'm no longer liking that fifth that we had. Let's do an octave, turn down a little bit, turn up the saturation. Beautiful pad. You can see how this thing is just an absolute monster for pads. So we can add another part if we want, and we have 24 voices, so you can honestly just keep going here. Let's make this one be a bit more of a plucky sound. So let's just make it a single PPG Wave style sound. Do a little LFO on the pitch. Simply beautiful, and the synth is 100% dry right now. So, along with our normal performance controls, like mod wheel and pitch wheel, we have the wave surfer, which acts like our wave envelope. It goes through all three waveforms, wave offsets, for each of the parts at the same time. So within this sound we've made, we can find new different sounds. Oh, beautiful. We've got pan spread, which we can do on a per part basis. Alright, so if it seems like I've been rushing through things and going over a lot really quickly, that's just because there is so much to cover on this synth and we can't cover everything. For example, we haven't even gotten to the effects yet. We've been hearing the synth completely dry, and I must say the effects on the third wave are amazing. So let's jump through those quickly. Now we've got a whole bunch of different effects, everything from BBD delay, chorus, phaser, flanger, distortion, a Leslie rotary speaker, ring mod, which I don't have time to show you all of them, but my absolute favorites, I'll go through a couple of them. One is the super plate reverb. It's one of the nicest sounding reverbs I've ever heard on a built-in synth for ambient. If I turn off the pad part of this, without the reverb. Let's just turn down the reverb a little, release. Boring basic sound. We add in our super plate. And anything on the effects is modulatable as well too, which I'll show you in a second. Another one of my favorites here is the Echoplex. So this is a really good tape emulation. If any of you guys saw my Strymon El Capistan video, the Echoplex is an incredible sounding digital tape delay emulation. We've got a lot of the same controls, and you know, this is my favorite type of delay by far. And this is, you've got wow and flutter. You can go crazy. You can make it sound completely broken. Amazing. You can make it self-oscillate. Let's go ahead here. Right? And then we can adjust the time. Incredible. So one of the other incredible things about these effects is every single parameter that I've been messing with here is modulatable. So for example, that's a bit more reasonable. Let's turn up the feedback here. Beautiful. So if I want to make that effect possible with aftertouch, let's go ahead, source, pressure. Where is pressure here? There you go. Destination. So there we go. So then let's change the amount. We can make it self-feedback as I use aftertouch. And then have it go away. Incredible performance tool. So the final thing I want to show you guys here is the miscellaneous and global settings. So essentially you can go in and you can do things like set a limiter on the master, which is really helpful with a synth that has such a wide gain stage. This way you're not going to clip on your way out. But the really special thing here is the circuit drift. So let's go ahead and turn that up. And this is like the vintage knob from the OB6 and Prophet 6. So if we turn it fully up, turn it down again. It's honestly quite hard to hear on this patch because it's so, turn down the release a little bit. It's so detuned already, but suffice to say, this sound is amazing if you're trying to recreate those vintage analogs sounds. The vintage knob is fantastic. Circuit drift, pardon me. We've also got our pitch bend settings here. And then same with, we've got glide mode. We can turn on glide here. Let's do some crazy glide action here. Beautiful. And then, yeah, you can do all sorts of things like disable the analog filter. We can go ahead and change things like our LED brightness. There's a whole bunch of options that we'd be here forever going over, but I really do find spending a lot of time around the vintage mode, the circuit drift at least. It's one of my absolute favorite things. And here you can handily change all your envelope shapes from PPG to exponential too. So hopefully I didn't go over that too fast there for you guys, but there really is so much to cover and I don't want to be here all day for an hour-long video. But how about some pros and cons? So first up, what I think of an amazing synthesizer, the sound quality has to be there. And the third wave absolutely sounds incredible in my opinion. This is the first hybrid hardware synth that I think rivals some of my analog polys like the OBX8, OB6, Prophet 6, Moog Sub 37 in terms of just pure sound quality. It's very hard to describe and I'm not sure how much of this is coming through in YouTube compression, but if you have the opportunity to play one of these, I highly recommend it because it just sounds three-dimensional to my ears. Secondly, the feature set is second to none. The fact that this has 24 voices, is 4-part multi-timbral, has 4 LFOs, a massive mod matrix with tons of slots and destinations, and incredible effects section, just keeps going on and on. This to me is when I think of a flagship synth, this is what I think of. It's got so much going for it. Thirdly, I think the workflow is incredible, and it's one of the most intuitive synths I've ever used. For how complicated it is and how deep you can get, it's really incredible how easy it is to just dial up great sounding patches. And finally, I know this is a big one for a lot of you guys, myself included, but the build quality is superb. This is the best built synth I have, up there with the OBX8, and I really feel like, not that I'm going to, but I could knock this into a wall and it would still work completely fine. It's built out of aluminum, there's metal everywhere. Each of the knobs is really well built, the screen feels super crisp. You can tell they spared no expense. So how about the cons? Well, leading off of my last pro, the elephant in the room has to be the price. This is a very pricey instrument, and it's definitely not something that one would spontaneously buy. But breaking down what you actually get for your money, this is a very reasonably priced synth for that upper echelon pro market. There's 24 SSM filters. For reference, the Prophet 5, which is almost as expensive, only has 5 of them. There's a whole bunch of really high quality analog and digital converters. There's 8 separate outputs, a whole bunch of features. The screen is amazing, like I said, so you really are getting kind of what you pay for. But price aside, I do have a couple other cons that are really important to address, and I hope they can change them in firmware because they do hamper an overall great experience. Firstly, unison mode, which we didn't look at too much in detail, needs some work. In unison mode, it's impossible not to get the envelopes to click. For whatever reason, the way it's programmed, when you use unison mode, you get a click between different notes, even if you have, multiple voices free, which is quite annoying. Finally, and I know it does sound like I'm nitpicking here, but the maximum amount of modulation on certain parameters I feel like really isn't enough. For example, with FM, I really want to be able to push the FM further than we're allowed to go. I'm not sure if that's a software limitation that can be addressed or if it's a hardware limitation, but I can't quite get those really gnarly bass sounds that I'm used to creating on Serum on this synth, despite, programming them the same way. It seems like there's just a hard cap at 127 where I want to push the FM further than it allows us to go. But as you can see, this is just me nitpicking. This synth is truly amazing, and Groove Synthesis, you guys should really be proud of yourselves. What an amazing release. You knocked it out of the park. Is it the greatest modern synth ever made? I'll leave that up for you guys to decide, but as always, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and like if you enjoyed this video, and let's check out some sounds to play us out.